The Minnesota Vikings are pretty much the best team in North American team sports to never win a championship. Welcome to Before We Die with Jesse and Thor on Purple Daily and Score North.
What's going on, everybody? This is Before We Die, brought to you by Purple Daily and Score North. I'm Jesse Pierce. He's Thor Nystrom. He's Ross Brundle. All right, you guys. Well, they went over to London. I still can't do the accent. Days later, still can't get it down. Cheerio, the Vikes win in the UK. Not a great game. They managed to pull it out. As I said last week, they don't ask how you do it. They ask how many. Minnesota moves to 3-1, top of the NFC North, with that tiebreaker against Green Bay, having beat them in week 1. However, you guys, this Vikings team could easily be 2-2. They could easily even be 1-3. I hate to say it because, again, not the best game. Lots to unpack here. Let's start with a they said it, because I started a little negative, and Kris Boyd, fourth-year cornerback for the Minnesota Vikings, tweeted it out. We got some ungrateful fans. I don't be on the internet looking for S word, but we won and some were still complaining. We got a big dub. We 3-1. STFU. Shut the blank up. Please find another team if you're not satisfied, or STFU. Well, guys, I wasn't satisfied. I'm happy with the win, but I was left very unsatisfied in said win. Would you agree?
Yes and no. I think it's positive that you're 3-1 after you've gotten two of your hardest games on your entire schedule out of the way in those first 4 games, and haven't played your best football in 3 of the 4. And yet you're 3-1. You're on a pace. Well, it's a 12-4 pace right now, but obviously there's 17 games or whatever. So however you want to extrapolate the extra one, but it's good news, right? This team is not even close to scratching the surface of its potential, I don't think. And yet again, it's 3-1 despite having gone through this difficult stretch of the schedule. This game against the Saints, it was sort of not the opposite in terms of the result, but opposite in the way that the game played out, in that, the game that they had played against the Lions, the Vikings were down the whole time and trying to claw back and everything like that. And then they pulled out a win that a lot of people didn't think they deserved to win. Whereas this game, it felt throughout the game, even when the score would be close, but it felt like the Vikings should be up by like 20 points. Like they were squandering opportunities to just run away with it. It turned out to be another close win, but you're absolutely going to take it. The thing that those two games had in common were they ended in Vikings wins, and that's the whole goal of the thing.
The Vikings have trailed in the fourth quarter every game since Green Bay. Like, that's a little concerning. Ross, I didn't mean to cut you off there, buddy. Dive in.
No, I cut you off. So again, I apologize. I'll echo. This is true. I'll echo what Thor said. I think you have to look at it from both sides. The team could easily be 1-3, but the fact is they're not. They're 3-1. I'll say what I said, I believe, last Monday on Before We Die. If you're going to rip on Kirk for not getting it done when it matters most, you got to give him some props when he does get it done when it matters most. And he's now done that in back-to-back weeks when, let's be honest, he hasn't looked all that great. I don't think Kirk has played really good football outside of the first 2 quarters of the year. I think he's played maybe even subpar at best. And to be 3-1, I think that's a really good sign, assuming the offense is going to come along and get better as the season goes on. On the Kris Boyd part, I get it, Kris. You've played the game. I don't. I would tell you STFU. Okay. I don't want my team to be 3-1. You should be 4-0. Wow. And you should want to play better every game. They should look at the last 2 games and say just what we've talked about on Before We Die. Wow, we're 3-1. We could easily be 1-3 and already thinking that our season's over. I would be focused about getting better on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively, and less about what fans have to say. Mm-hmm. The fans will show up and support you during the game. That's fine. He shouldn't care really what people think about on Twitter anyways. And I guarantee you a lot of those people he's referring to probably don't even have real names next to their profiles. Okay. So Kris Boyd, you need to calm down and you need to focus on actually trying to win the games and just the team playing better, because I can go off on the defense again. I won't, but
we will. No, we'll get into that. I think we have to. We have to do justice to our fans,
I'm still having the same problems with the defense that I've had basically since halftime of week 1.
Yeah, no, the defense is bleeding more than a Jeffrey Dahmer victim. Sorry, was that too much?
Whoa!
I saw the Netflix series. I'm watching.
You've been
the Netflix
watching too
series.
much of that thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a
That was
great
aggressive.
it's maybe it's been what 30-ish years, I think.
Yeah,
I don't know.
apologies. Like I'm not.
That's
gonna get me
that's
some heat,
tough.
my bad.
I will say, Jesse, I thought after the first one, I wasn't sure I could continue, and I did. I finished it. I enjoyed it.
It's intense. I can only take it one ep at a time, similar to these Vikings games, one at a time. No talking about the defense. Do we hate the Ed Dontel defense? I mean, Andy Dalton had no pressure, found enough soft zones to move the ball on those final 4 drives. It's just week after week, it doesn't seem like there's any improvement. And yes, you can say it's, it's still early. It's not though. We are a quarter of the way through the season, and those pieces just have not been fixed. Enough confidence. You watch Patrick Mahomes and his little flick into the end zone and the way he runs, like you can't compete against that. And that's a team that you'd have to go through, right? Like that, those are problems that need to get ironed out now. You can't keep waiting to push it off until make or break toward the end.
1,000%. I want to see adjustments from Donatello. We've been talking about this every week, and we don't see those adjustments. What we see is after the game, if anyone questions Ed Donatello, it's my scheme is awesome. The players aren't running it right. Well, Ed, maybe go back and watch the film, and maybe we can do some other stuff. I don't. There is a gray area in there where there's players that aren't. You can see what he's talking about in terms of like players not doing their assignments in plays. Like a good example is like Hicks in coverage, like, seating extra separation or not getting out into the flat quick enough, stuff like that. And so Donatello, maybe you blame him, but by and large, Donatello does have talent on this defense. Like his in the front seven, the defensive front, they have played really well so far. Both the interior defensive linemen, all 3 of them. If you want to toss Wanneman, had a pretty good game in the last one in London. And then the edge rushers have, by and large have done what has been asked of them so far. But yeah, I mean, it's on Donatello to make some of these schematic adjustments against, for instance, a team that's going to run the ball more or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then also, if the players aren't executing the assignment that you're giving them, you either need to yank them off the field or else do a better job teaching them as opposed to throwing them under the bus.
No, I would completely agree. Sticking with the defense, Lewis Cine, you guys, we've been touting, we've been wanting him. You want to see him in. He gets into the game this Sunday, and he's hurt, and he's lost for the season. What do we make of that? I mean, we kind of talked about it throughout the course. Like, are they not overhyping is the wrong word, but are they, fibbing a little bit, over exaggerating his quote unquote injury to save face because he's a top pick? Or was there really something to that? I mean, was it similar to, he went in and got hurt further because of this lagging injury? What are your guys' thoughts? Will we see Lewis Cine ever again?
Well, we're going to see him next year. We're not going to see him again this year. And all you had to do is watch the replay of that injury to know that at least with this one, I mean, it just is what it is. His season's going to be done. As you know, I did think they were exaggerating his little minor injury coming out of camp, but this was really unfortunate because, it was this player that you want to see him. You want to see the developmental progression, but you can't expect him to develop when you're just sitting him on the bench the whole time. And so the Vikings were in this spot with Louis Cine where it's like, we want to play him, we want to develop him, but we don't quite trust him yet. And hopefully it was going to trend more and more towards getting him on the field in on defense. Because of course he was playing on special teams, but like we wanted to see him mix in there. And this is going to prevent that until at least the beginning of next year. Although they were playing him so little on defense anyway, perhaps the way that they see it is we didn't need him to develop physically. He already has all the physical tools that he would ever need. That's why we took him in the first round. It's the mental part of the game. So hopefully, I mean, there's no silver lining to this. It sucks. You basically, your first round pick, you're basically going to get nothing out of him his rookie year when you are a contender. The Vikings, by definition, as a 3-1 first place team, are a contender. That stuff sucks. But hopefully now you can get him, more into the film room, talk about the decision-making stuff like that, run simulations with him. the decision-making stuff. Hopefully you still do something to try to improve that, even though he's not able to be on the field or even in the short term running around at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you want to choose to be positive here, there is precedent within the Minnesota Vikings franchise. 2006, a very similar thing happened to Chad Greenway, who was injured very early on in his rookie season, didn't play at all in 2006 for the most part, came back, had a very good career for the Minnesota Vikings, was a very good player. I think we all remember that. I think that's your hope for Lewis Cine. The same thing, that he comes back and that he's just fine. And to Thor's point, spend a little bit of time in the film room. Maybe the game slows down a little bit so he can go back out on the field and do the things instinctually that his talent should allow him to do. So if you're choosing to be positive, I think that is the hope. But now you're also going to hope that Cam Bynum is solid all year. Metellus is solid when called upon. We saw Harrison Smith get injured late. He's already missed some time with the concussion. You're already starting to test that depth a little bit, and you're only a quarter of the way through the season. But by and large, it's not a great sign at all for Mr. Cine because we barely saw him. But I'm going to choose to remain positive and hope that year 2 will be much better than year 1 for him.
And as far as this year, this isn't going to affect the team almost at all, right? I mean, and that's sort of a sad commentary in and of itself, but it just is what it is. Lewis Cine was only number the four safety on the depth chart, maybe even 5th. Certainly he is behind Metellus. That's where it starts to get interesting after that, but we weren't probably going to see him in the base defense, barring a catastrophe, until later in the season, potentially. I think next year is when they were probably internally is when they're sort of gauging that he's going to take over a job, hopefully. And hopefully that this injury is not something that will compromise that. Again, like he has all the athleticism, everything like that. You wouldn't expect how young he is for this injury to depreciate any of that. And again, like Ross and I are saying, hopefully you can work on the thing that was actually keeping him off the field, despite the fact that he can't get on and out because of that injury.
Yeah, let's switch back to the other side of the ball. Now, I will preface this by saying Kevin O'Connell is off to the best start by a Vikings head coach since Denny Green won 5 of the first 6 games in 1992. So that's great. We love it. We're liking what he's doing. There's also a lot of things that I don't care for with Kevin O'Connell. Let's name clock management as number 1. Now, we've seen glimpses of that before. Obviously, I'm going to point to the field goal on 4th and 1 instead of taking a timeout. Do you guys think Kevin O'Connell doesn't have his full trust in the offense? Because in those situations, you should have that confidence. And we have seen him back in week 1 go for it on situations like that. But Vikings went 2 for 5 in the red zone, which puts them below 50% this season, which again begs me to ask, how's KOC feeling about his offense? And do you think he regrets the clock mismanagement he had on that play in particular, among other plays that I saw as miscued?
I think he regrets several things from that game. There was clock management things. There was some wonky in-game decisions. You're sort of alluding to a couple of them. And then overall treetop strategic wise, I also thought there was just some weird general strategy things that the Vikings were trying and or not trying against the Saints team that was so down. Yeah, I mean, they're down in general, this year's team compared to some of these ones we've seen over the past 5-6 years or whatever. But this week, even way more so because of all the inactives, all the injuries that they had. And again, that was the frustration of the fan base that Kris Boyd seems to be frustrated with, is you're watching this game and you're like, we should be routing this team by 20 points or 28 points or whatever, and it's a field goal game.
Handily. So they should have been winning handily.
They should have won. I mean, on the field, they were clearly the better team, but you're letting this down opponent, this poor opponent with Andy Dalton starting next to, Latavius Murray, blast from the pass and all this sort of stuff. That's the frustrating aspect of it. But again, can't lose sight of the fact that the Vikings are 3-1 in first place of the division when you've gotten one of the hardest stretches of your schedule already out of the way. Going forward, the Vikings schedule is so far beyond manageable. There are so many contenders that are going to be facing more grisly schedules going forward than the Vikings. These things like the mistakes that O'Connell was making, or some of the strategic decisions that he was making. The great thing about it is, again, you're still 3-1 despite some of that stuff happening. And O'Connell is a very self-aware person. He's happy to admit to all this stuff after the game. Like, yeah, I screwed up there. I will be better. A little bit different than Zimmer. Zimmer sometimes would take accountability, and sometimes he'd get furious at someone asking him a question that would indicate that he should be taking accountability for something.
Zim, happiest guy on earth. What are you talking about?
Yeah, happiest guy on earth. But yeah, no, I do expect O'Connell to address some of those things for sure. So again, happy they got out of the way while the Vikings still had a great start.
I also think Kris Boyd just needs to think a little bit about, what it's like being a Vikings fan right now. Because I'll push back on Thor a little bit. Thor talks about the Vikings schedule being manageable, and it is. But again, I ask you, when are the Green Bay Packers going to lose again next? The Eagles already are a game up on you, and they have the tiebreaker. So if you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, you are thinking, and you should think this way, every game is important. And again, we talked about this in the preseason. Jesse, you asked, is this a Super Bowl or bust team? And I'm not entirely sure what my answer is, but generally, or what it was, but generally when I get asked that question, I always say you kind of need to see the season play out a little bit. But with this Minnesota Vikings team, I would say, I don't know if it's Super Bowl or bust, but they got to get pretty close because that's what ownership expects. That's why they hired Kwesi. That's why they hired KOC. Mm-hmm. So when Kris Boyd, I don't want to say he insulted the fans. I get it. Kris Boyd feels like he has a job to do, and he does. Team goes out and wins. I can see why he'd be upset. But you also have to understand, being a Minnesota Vikings fan that always has to hear about how great the Green Bay Packers have it. Then you look at their schedule, and even though they were pushed a bit yesterday, you start to think, well, they're not going to lose until they play Buffalo maybe at the end of the month. So it's just, I think people just need to, players and fans need to kind of live in the moment a little bit and be a little bit understanding of each other. Let's be more accepting.
And one thing that did go the Vikings' way, field goals, ladies and gentlemen. That's not often.
Baby.
Minnesota Vikings, double doink. Love some double doink to secure that winner. Greg Joseph also 5 for 5. Wall kicking, which is fantastic. You love to see it.
He did miss that extra point. I hate that on his parade.
Yeah. Did Jesse almost swear again?
I said, shh. I don't swear. I'm clean cut. No, but again, it goes back to, why did we kick so many field goals, right? Like, what do you think it is? And Kirk Cousins, they said it for this week. Cousins said there's just a lot to clean up still, similar to coming away after the Lions with the win. You feel great about the win, but you also feel there's a lot you left out there. We've got to get better. I've got to get better. That's kind of where our focus is. And there seemed to be some miscommunication again with Jefferson and Kirk. But still, I will credit KOC and his offense. There were some really brilliant plays yesterday too. You remember Alexander Madison, brilliant call, 3rd and goal, screen for the touchdown. Some good things there. But again, you're 4 games in. How much longer do you have to work this system out?
But I think that's the positive, though, and we've already kind of hashed it a little bit. But to be 3-1, and look, I don't know if the offense is going to be ever really firing on all cylinders this year and be the world's greatest offense, but I do think they're going to be better. They can't help but not be better. You'd like to think eventually they're going to be able to run the ball a bit better. I mean, I believe that, and I think you'd like to think they'll be more consistent in the passing game. So overall, I think you have to be optimistic, at least there. Mm-hmm. The defense is another story.
I feel like my fantasy football team is going to get better as well. Kyler Murray.
Obligatory.
Finally showed up for me yesterday. I dominated, got a win back in the win column. Just like the Vikings, who have won 2 straight. We will cover more of the Bears coming up in Thursday's episode of Before We Die, brought to you by Purple Daily and Score North. But guys, all in all, we'll kind of round it out with this. So the Minnesota Vikings team is 3-1 on a scale of 1 to 10. How do you feel about where they're at?
I feel I'll put it like 8.5. I'm pretty bullish.
Shocking.
On the team.
That's never saw that coming.
I modulated it, but
Resident Homer Thor.
No, I haven't picked one wrong yet, and they are on the exact pace that I gave out. I gave out the 12-5 was my prediction, and they're on a 12-4 pace. And another thing I think to be positive about with this is, we see with Kirk Cousins throughout his career, you're always going to get the one bad month from Kirk Cousins where he sort of couples together a couple down games. You typically only get one a season, and then you also get the stretch where he's playing like an MVP candidate, or then more prototypical Kirk. I think this was his down month. But in some of those games, he has looked off. Obviously, he was clicking against the Packers, was way off in the Eagles game, seemed to be off in the Lions game. And I thought for large stretches of the Saints game against a defense that isn't very good, that he wasn't playing up to par of what certainly what you would expect of him in that situation. And yet they are 3-1. And Kirk, by the way, is 11th out of 33 qualifying quarterbacks in PFF grade, which actually surprised me. I thought he was going to be more middle of the pack in terms of what my eyes had seen. Yes, they are going to run the ball better going forward. I think you're going to see more Alexander Mattison working in with Cook, and the usage there will become more 60-40, like something like that going forward. The receiving core is there. They were finally able to get the ball back to Jefferson after 2 games where the opponent just gave multiple defenders to taking him away. 10 targets in this game was clearly a priority to target Jefferson. He wasn't blowing the top off the defense, doing some of the things that he did against in the first game against the Packers, but they were able to spread the ball a little bit. But again, Cousins wasn't clicking, but now on this team, you have a really good offensive line. And you can get through some of these periods where Cousins isn't playing up to his normal par and the team is still 3-1. I think there's a lot of positives spinning it forward.
I think I could have went with a 7.5, but just to make Kris Boyd angry, I'm going to go with a 6.5. And I still think that's a pretty good score.
You're just not over Kris Boyd. Are you just Stevie over there? You bring him up constantly.
I just think it's a dumb comment to make for a guy who's on a team that is 3-1, like he talked about. There's no need to get nitpicky with the fans. And again, like I said, a lot of fans that probably don't have real names or pictures next to their profile. There's just no need for that. Focus on football.
I mean,
but again,
I was critical, but that's just me. So
well, I was too, but that's every fan's right. I get very annoyed when coaches and players do the old, well, you never played the game. Well, no, I didn't, but I can tell you a quarterback throwing 4 interceptions isn't good, or a cornerback getting burned for 150 yards isn't good. But overall, to echo what Thor said, I think things are I don't want to say overwhelmingly, but they're positive, and they should be. You're 3-1. You could easily be 1-3. You're 3-1. No need to apologize for it. I do think the offense will get better. One thing that I think is interesting that we could spend a little bit of time on it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Vikings could have had their bye week this week. They chose to defer it. They didn't want to have it so early in the season. It'll be interesting to see.
It's kind of a bye week anyway, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Don't. As a Gopher football fan, let's not talk about games you think you should win. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with Chicago coming to town. I still think Chicago's functional. I don't think they're as brutal as most people think they are. I think they're functional enough, but the Vikings, again, this is another game they should win comfortably. I will be a little upset if it goes to the fourth quarter and we're grinding it out.
Come Thursday, I will have a new synonym for us to use instead of throttle or handily. We'll come up with something different if that's how we feel.
I also want to clarify something. I said where. I don't play for the team, so I'm gonna walk that comment back. We're going into the fourth quarter in a one-score game.
Yeah,
if
Ross, when are you going to take your victory lap for the prediction of Ryan Wright's going to have passing yards?
That's right.
I want the victory lap.
Right.
It immediately came
That's
through.
right.
What a call!
There we go. Beauty.
Now,
what a beauty.
Do I double down? Does he do it again at some point this year, or is he going to be rushing yards? Is he going to rush for some yards?
I would love that. He's a big burly guy, bigger than Bursvich coming out. I think he could break a couple tackles.
6'4", 235.
That's right.
Not the best pass, but it made it. I thought it was going to short hop, but it made it.
Hey, don't criticize. Kris Boyd's watching. He's not going to be happy. You call that a duck.
I hope you take Kris Boyd in this video, just so just see what happens. If you boys don't mind, I would like to give my rating for 1 to 10 on the Vikings.
Go right ahead. It's your show.
Recapturing, I'm reeling it back in like I do those fish. God, I love fall fishing, by the way. Second of all, so you guys are going to be surprised. I'm going to go optimistic. I'm going to give him a 7-2 because I see glimpses of a lot of good. And again, I'm trying to be patient. I'm trying to remain optimistic. But I look at Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and I'm like, I want that. Like, that's what I want. I want to be a fan of a team like that, and the Vikings aren't there. And again, those are Super Bowl teams. I always do that with any team across the board. It's like you look and you see what it takes. That's not Minnesota. And of course, it would be natural for Minnesota to have taken a step back this year with all the changes that technically were made. It wouldn't be terrible. So a 7-2, I think that's pretty positive because, me and my closet Green Bay Packers fandom, it's just,
I was just going to say, per the comments on YouTube, you are a Packers fan. So to get a 7.2, that's pretty good.
I think that's pretty good. We'll take it. We'll take it. Again, we will dive more into the matchup with the Chicago Bears in Minneapolis Sunday on Thursdays Before We Die, brought to you by Purple Daily and Score North. Now, as we do with every episode, we're going to wrap it up with a couple Before We Dies. Who wants to go first? Ross, you want to go first?
I'd like to go first.
Thor's going first. He's calling. All right. Giddy up.
Before I die, I would like Jesse to acknowledge that my alma mater, the University of Kansas, beat Iowa State on Saturday.
That's never going to happen. I didn't watch the game, so it didn't exist. It paid no attention to it. It was a close game, though, I think I saw, right?
It was a field goal game.
Yeah, there you go.
So now the alma mater battle between us, we're 1-1.
You got to pick. You can't be all of these different teams. You have to.
I have two alma maters. And you knew I was going to get revenge on you after Iowa lost to Iowa State, and my Kansas Jayhawks came through. But we'll take the split for this year.
Okay,
we'll take the split.
Well, what happens when the Gophers beat Iowa?
When the Gophers beat Iowa, I think I'm going to have to pay a punishment to Ross.
You're going to get slimed.
I'm going to count that as a win to me too because Iowa lost again. So I'm going to say that's going to be our tiebreaker.
That's a dubious win claim right there.
That's what I'm going to say because I can be an Iowa State fan and a Gopher fan. Those teams don't play each other.
No, that's fair. But you took me to task for doing that where I'm a Hawkeye fan most of the year.
Because they're both Big Ten teams.
Well,
yeah, you can't do that. That's like me cheering.
Similar. I ain't gonna root for the Gophers over Iowa, but
I kind of agree with Jesse, but I don't like to tell people how to be fans. So you guys can just squabble in the corner about who wins, who loses.
That's fine. Whatever.
My Before I Die, I'm gonna stick with the college football theme. And I had just this wonderful thought over the weekend, and shameless plug, I talked about it on the Twitter machine, or I posted on the Twitter machine at Brendel Ross. Thor, do you remember, let's go back about a decade or so, where every year Clemson would go like 9-3, and at the most inopportune time, they would trip all over themselves, and it even became a well-known thing. It was called Clemsoning, okay? And this came to my mind. The Gophers now every year inexplicably are no-showing a home game against an opponent they should win. I am now going to call that gophering. And I am okay with that because if you tell me the payoff will be 5 years down the road, the Gophers are in the college football playoff almost every year. Let's go. Before I die, people will call it gophering on a large scale when the Gophers show a home game and lose a game they shouldn't. Gophering, baby.
Gophering. I feel kind of sad about that though. No. I get it. In the end game, it's good. It's positive. But
he's not wrong though. And that was tough. But then again, we didn't know that Mo Ibrahim was going to be out for that game. And I saw some Judd was one of them had mentioned on Twitter about how you want to see the colleges start to release injury reports. But that's what makes it so interesting in college, because in contrast to the NFL, where you have to, like by rule, you have to have accurate reporting of your injury information to the media and to the opponent. In college, not only do you not have to do that, it goes even further where coaches can hide behind HIPAA laws. So, I mean, they will obfuscate it. They can exaggerate it. They can say nothing about it, and all these different things. Nobody knew that Mo Ibrahim was injured before that game. And then like an hour before the game or whatever, it's announced he's not going to be active. Totally changed the constitution of that Gopher offense. We all love Tanner Morgan here, but we all, I think, also acknowledge that Tanner Morgan, when he does not have a good supporting cast of skill guys around him, his game always goes way down. It's like what happened after 2019 when they lost Johnson, and then Bateman was to come. But when those guys were off the field, he played way down. And then last year when Ibrahim was out, was able to sort of get by because the defense was really good, but that was unfortunate. And then Purdue got guys back that we didn't know were going to be back. Aiden O'Connell, their quarterback, had missed the game before, and then he was inactive for them. So active, not inactive, active for them. So it was a tough day for the Gophers, but I think that they're going to bounce back once they get Mo back.
Jesse, can you bring us home and please make it a little bit positive, because I don't want the masses on this Marconi nominated brand to see me cry, because I'm still that upset and disgusted by what happened at Huntington Bank Stadium on Saturday.
I apologize for you. I mean, mine's more of a personal before we die. Before we die, I'm going to get a little recording thing that says we are recording in hopes of deterring my dog, my kids, my husband, everybody that tries to interrupt. If you ever see this door behind me magically move, that's why. So I'm going to get one of those little recording, please, STFU. Wrap that up with Kris Boyd.
I like that.
Yeah.
Did we even have Kris Boyd record? You could get a cameo from him and get him to say what you want him to say.
Exactly.
And then it will trigger by motion.
Right?
Yeah.
Did we just learn that Jesse's dog knows how to read? I think that's the big takeaway here.
Yeah,
that is big.
That's true. She's smart. Everybody in this household got some brains, mostly me. But yeah.
Love to see it.
Love to see it. Again, you guys, thank you for checking us out. This is Monday's edition of Before We Die, brought to you by Purple Daily and Score North. I'm Jesse Pierce. He's Thor Nystrom. He's Ross Brendel. We are bringing you Vikings takes, recaps, and a little bit of fun twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. You love to see it. Again, your Minnesota Vikings are 3-1, facing a test. I won't say easy or hard. I'll say a test on Sunday against the Chicago Bears. Join us on Thursday to hear our thoughts on that. Don't forget to check out all the rest of the Purple Daily content, serving all your Vikings needs. You love it. Leave your comments. We're probably going to start sprinkling more of your comments, guys. We like it. We love it, in fact. And also be sure to come back Thursday for more of Thor's Hammers.
Love it.
That's it. All right,
Minnesota
guys.
forever. Skull Vikings, baby.